Superstar edition of the Always Irish Show. As always, you can find the program on YouTube. Do hit subscribe if you haven't yet. I'd appreciate that. Give the video a thumbs up if you approve of the content upon its completion. I'd appreciate that as well. Always Irish on Twitter. Search bar. Just type in the name or at JKZND4. Emails, alwaysIrishND@gmail.com. Audio only, anywhere you want me, you can get me. Always Irish Radio, 312-900-8815. We are targeting a Tuesday evening live call-in YouTube stream chat show. Be there or be square. So here's the deal. If you would like to share your opinion on Notre Dame football, then you got to give Always Irish a call. 312-900-8815. So, here we are, folks. It seems like a whirlwind with all that has been going on in Notre Dame football land the last couple weeks. All the moving parts, all of the worry, all the excitement, all of the rumors, just all of it. There has been a lot going on that is moving at an extremely fast pace. It has been a lot to keep up with. Intellectually, emotionally, we've been all over the place for the last couple weeks. And on the back end of it, ended up exactly where I wanted to. Couldn't be happier. A pluses, okay? A plus from this guy. So now that we're through a lot of that initial chaos that ensued when Kelly started this domino effect of all these changes, now that that's calmed down, I have had a chance to sit back and digest, read, and listen to some of the ongoing coverage of this initial beginning of what's going to be the modern era of Notre Dame football, the Freeman Rees era. So I was so worried about putting out my content, making sure I had the right information and everything I wanted to present the right way. Now that things have calmed down, I've had a chance to read a lot, listen to some of these other national podcasts, whatever, hear what they're saying. One thing I've learned through this week is just how critical Tommy Rees was to making the Freeman Factor era happen. Now, this is an amazing story. I think the character perceptual arc of Tommy Rees in his Notre Dame experience overall, recruit, player, run away from the cops, coach, like there has been an amazing arc here with him and the perception, the way Notre Dame fans view him, talk about him, see him. It's changed a lot as he's changed a lot and his roles and connection with Notre Dame's changed a lot. I just think it's an amazing story. And I wanted to talk about it a little bit because I believe it's an important part of this bigger narrative. And he's going to be a huge part of if this new Freeman Factor era works or not. So it's worth talking about. And you know what else? Tommy Rees deserves it to be talked about too. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Unbelievable roller coaster for Mr. Rees. No way around it. Unbelievable roller coaster up and down. 3-star quarterback recruit from my neck of the woods in the suburbs of Chicago. He was rated the 20th pro-style quarterback. Not a lot of fanfare as a recruit. As a player, did some nice things. Nobody ever questioned his ability to process the game mentally. Tommy just had some physical limitations. Let's just be honest. We all do. We all have limitations in our given career that are going to stop us from getting to the next level or whatever. He just wasn't that physically gifted of a player in the overall scheme of what Notre Dame fans want their quarterback to look like. I think we can all agree with that. So he had ups and downs in the early part of the Kelly era and everything else. Turnover Tommy was a thing that I don't ever want to have to go back and relive or think about. But there was that period of time where every ball he threw had a magnet to the other jersey, and it was just a total frustrating nightmare. Okay, so you have turnover Tommy, Then you had arrest, running from the cops at a house party, drinking Tommy, and that mug shot. You could Google if you want. I don't feel like I'm out of bounds bringing that up because even Rees himself did in a recent interview we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So yeah, the non-fanfare recruited quarterback in Notre Dame, that never goes over that well with people like me, okay? Turnover Tommy, arrest running from the cops at a house party, that mugshot Tommy, missed the 2012 opening game in Dublin against Navy as a result of those legal issues, and Golson played in that ball game. Not the flashiest career playing-wise for sure. He ended up kind of rotating with Golson. That 2012 year was super interesting. Won all the regular season games with a mixture of Golson and then bringing in Rees to make a critical throw or whatever. Very difficult role to be thrust into, but he made it work. They went undefeated. But overall, nobody could disagree if you love Notre Dame. Not the flashiest career at all as a player for Tommy Rees. Then he goes to Northwestern as a GA. Then he goes to the Chargers as an offensive analyst after that. That's some of the backstory. Here's where it starts to get really, really interesting, though. In 2017, Rees comes back to Notre Dame as the quarterback coach under Kelly. Now, that in a lot of ways makes absolute perfect sense to me. There's familiarity there between Brian Kelly and Tommy Rees. They know each other's work ethic, all that kind of stuff. Kelly knows the way that Rees processes the game. Everybody says he has a brilliant football mind, comes from a football family. Dad was a football savant involved in the game his whole career. We know that Tommy knew football. That was never a part of my questioning of Tommy Rees as a quarterback or a coach until this point. It never was. I don't know if he knows football well enough. There were issues and things I questioned about all this, but that was not the problem. And we're going to get to what was, but that was not the issue I had with any of this Rees coming back home stuff. All right? So he comes back. It makes sense as the quarterback coach. You get it. That makes perfect sense. It's a good fit. Was able to go to Northwestern, go to the NFL, get a little experience, come back. Fine. Then Chip Long leaves, and the question becomes, what is Kelly going to do with the offensive coordinator position? Is he going to go outside and hire somebody? Are they going to promote Rees from the inside? That was the big question. So they ended up promoting Rees to offensive coordinator to mixed reviews when that news initially hit. I questioned it. Okay? I admit that. Everybody loves Tommy Rees this week. I'm admitting I questioned that promotion from quarterback coach, offensive analyst, whatever, to offensive coordinator. All right? And here's why. Even to this day, I feel that the reasons I question this hire were legitimate, and I do not back down from them at all. Here's number one. Brian Kelly hiring somebody he's had power over since the kid was 17 years old. I didn't like that dynamic. There's a power difference here that has been set in stone since Rees was 17 years old. Brian Kelly's been his boss, basically, as a recruit, as a player, and then as a coach. So I question that power dynamic in the way of Rees has always just been so far underneath Kelly. Will Kelly respect Rees if Rees goes to him and says, this offense, you got to let me loosen it up and open things up and get modern and do some new things? Would Kelly allow that or not? I was uncomfortable with that power balance that's been in play since Rees was literally a teenager when it comes to Kelly. I didn't see them as equals or being looked at as equals in any way at all. More so than just the normal amount that head coach has more power and say than the offensive coordinator. Obviously, there's a power dynamic there that has to be there that I respect. This was a little bit more than that. Knowing the way Kelly is, I didn't trust him to let Tommy do what he really wants to do with the offense. So that's number one reason I was concerned about that. Number two is, again, while I have no doubt Rees knows all about offensive football, he didn't do that exact job before. So first job as an offense coordinator at Notre Dame, how's that going to go? That's a legitimate concern. And number 3, it relates to number 1. I feared Brian Kelly wouldn't let Rees run a modern offense. Not as modern as I want it, not as modern as Rees wants it. So my concerns, again, were never about the football acumen or knowledge or all that. My concerns with this marriage was just Kelly choking Rees out. And it's a guy he could easily control because he's been his boss basically since he was 18. And he could kind of dictate how things are going to go. And there's only a certain amount Rees can or will push back to it. That was my concern. Okay? And I feel like all those concerns were legitimate. So Rees then gets the job. And you could see glimpses of great. And also times where you're like, what are we doing here? This is kind of blah. I need a little more. Whether it be personnel issues for one reason or another, Brian Kelly putting the clamps down on what can be done or not done from an offensive schematic attacking standpoint, whatever. So I always hear how well thought of he is in these circles. So then I'm saying, well, then let's score 40 points a game then. Like I keep hearing what a genius he is. Let's score 40 a game then. Let's get modern. Let's open up this offense. Especially in these bigger type games. The playoff in the ACC championship games last year, perfect example. Notre Dame lost those 2 games before they even started because they refused to even try and have an attacking offense. And everybody knew that's what it was going to take to stay in those ball games versus a more healthy Clemson and then Alabama in the playoff. They just wouldn't do it. So whether Rees didn't want to, Kelly wouldn't let him, whatever. Those games were lost before they started because we didn't even try to push it on offense and do anything. So things like that are where I had some issues. But at the same time, you're sitting there going, Mr. Notre Dame fan going, am I to be mad at Tommy Rees for this? That our offense looks like they're not even trying to be aggressive against a team we know is better than us? It's the only way you could do it. We didn't do it. Is that on Rees or is that on Kelly? Or is it a blend? I don't know. There really is no good way to know. So then comes Brian Kelly leaving for LSU. And we find out in an interview that Rees gave with Ryan Russillo earlier in the week that we were a couple hours away from Rees leaving, probably Freeman leaving, and we're pretty much screwed. It was that close. Couple hours here, couple hours there, couple phone calls go the other way. Not only is Rees gone, but then they're probably going to go a different direction than Freeman. And we could end up in a vastly different position. And this show, the tone of this show, would be much, much different. In that interview, Rees said he wanted to fight for ND. Here's the thing. I was honestly a little taken back and shocked by the candor Tommy Rees had in this interview. He was giving a lot of specific details and timelines of how this all went down. And I was a little shocked at how truthful he really was, to be honest with you. But Rees said in that interview with Russillo, he wanted to fight for Notre Dame. It was like they were being pillaged and he couldn't sit there and take it and wanted to stand up for Notre Dame. And that's the kind of thing that all of us really want to hear as lovers of Notre Dame. Okay? He talked about, in this interview, his belief in Marcus Freeman. And he said specifically, the biggest difference you're going to see is the way Marcus relates to our players and recruits is totally different than anything we had here. And you're going to see positive things happen as a result. So, where does that leave us now? The first thing is, I'm going to push back a little bit on some of the people who reached out to me about the Ryan Russillo interview before I'd heard it. Listen, I can't act like Rees is some mercenary who was willing to work at Notre Dame for $0 because he just loved Notre Dame. Like, I can't go that far the way some people are running with that Ryan Russillo interview. I can't. This wasn't Bayless saying he said, I would be totally fine dying in this weight room at Notre Dame with you guys. Like, this was not that. So I'm not going to give Rees that level of mercenary credibility, willing to work at Notre Dame for nothing, no matter what, because I just love Notre Dame. It was somewhat about money, and he even admits that he was sitting there last week waiting for the deals to come in from LSU and Notre Dame. So I'm pushing back on that a little bit because it was still about money. He wasn't just going to come here no matter what to save Notre Dame, for not whatever amount of money it was. Way more than $1 million, I understand. Way more than $1 million. So, a year. So, while I'm not crediting him for that, since this was a financial decision and Notre Dame outdid LSU, Captain Jack and Father John deserve a lot of credit for not being cheapskates and for doing what it takes to create this package deal of Rees coming as offensive coordinator, teaming up with Freeman, and off to the races we go. So credit to Father and the captain for maintaining that continuity. So this is just wild. This is just wild how this all came to be. This big career arc of Tommy Rees's perception. He went from me yelling at the TV, turn over, Tommy, what are you doing? I never want to see you play again, to one of the main factors that made my dream come true of getting the Freeman factor to be a real thing. So what a career arc it's been in this perceptual shift in the ups and downs of Tommy Rees, right? So here's two notes that I want to finish on, and they are very important to me. These are two things that Rees said to Russillo in his interview, and they're the two things that stood out to me perhaps the most. Here's number one. Rees specifically said it's a priority of his that if he was going to stay at Notre Dame, no matter who the next coach was going to be, he wanted full autonomy of the offense, and he was never going to have that under Brian Kelly, even if he was called the offensive coordinator. That is a huge factor for me. I've been saying I'm okay with Rees as the offensive coordinator if whoever it is going to let Rees do what Rees wants to do in his football mind. He knows modern offensive football. Somebody needs to trust him and let him go do it. That was never going to happen under Kelly because of Kelly's personality. All right? Rees even said so. So now we're in a situation where Freeman and Rees have a fantastic, close relationship built on trust. And here's what we're going to do. Rees is going to be able to run the offense. Freeman's going to do either the defense or be more involved and then have a defense coordinator as well. And we're going to see how modern we could get. Freeman's going to back off and let Rees build out this modern offense the way he wants to. I'm excited for that. People are throwing it back at me. John, you were pushing back when they hired Rees. Now you're excited about him. Yeah, because Brian Kelly had a clamp on his nutsack and wouldn't let him open it up and get as modern as you need to be to win big. So once we release the noose off Tommy Rees's newt sack, maybe we'll see what he could actually do, and I'm excited for that. Here's number two. Number two is, this might excite me even more than thinking of Tommy Rees creating a modern, open up, fast, exciting offense. Number two, Tommy Rees spoke to Ryan Russillo specifically about the pressure of being an assistant coach and trying to recruit with Marcus Freeman also being a coach in the same building recruiting. Tommy specifically said, if you're on a staff with Marcus Freeman, everybody else has to step their game up because you don't want to be the one in that locker room and everybody knows that guy's outworking you and getting better results in recruiting than you are. You don't want to be that guy. You can't be that guy that isn't working as hard or getting the results, and you got this guy right here hitting home runs. Everybody knows then who's performing and who isn't, who's delivering talent and who isn't. I love this. I absolutely love it. A few months ago when I talked about why I wanted Freeman to be the head coach, one of those items in the recruiting bullet point was specifically, if Freeman's the head coach, the way Freeman recruits becomes the standard. If the head guy's working that hard, there's no excuse for anybody underneath him that doesn't have the same amount of responsibilities to work hard, as hard or harder than Freeman does. So that standard in recruiting that the head guy sets has a trickle-down effect. That's the bar to be on his staff. And he's got 100 more things than you got to do in a day, week, month, year as the head coach than you do as whatever your role is. You can't get out recruited by that guy. That's a bad look in front of your boss. Bad look. So the natural pressure placed by the bar being so high, the way Marcus Freeman recruits, is the tide that's going to raise all ships. Because guess what Marcus Freeman's going to do? If you don't recruit well enough, guess what? You're out. And we'll get a guy in here who is. That's the deal with him. And he made it very clear. So I, for one, am in love with this idea. So overall, with Brian Kelly out of the picture, I am totally embracing the Freeman Rees era and what it could be. I think that is a perfect marriage. Those guys get along great. And Tommy's just not flashy. And he doesn't shave. And he's not into the vanity. And he just shows up and does his job. I think a lot of times a guy like that gets overlooked. Or you look at him and you look at him and he looks rough and scruffy. And you're just like, how put together is this guy? And I think that hurts his perception over time. And I think I've probably fallen into that as well. But everybody around Notre Dame loves him and respects him, and that's a big deal, and it goes a long way with the players and recruits. So with BK out of the way, I'm fine with Rees as the offensive coordinator. That's the thing. People are telling me, oh, you were against this when it happened. Not because of Rees, because of Kelly. Can't you see that? It wasn't against Rees. It was that I knew Kelly was going to have a clamp on him and not let him do what it takes to open it up and win big ball games. Now that's gone. Freeman trusts him to build this out, a modern, fast offense. And I love it, and I'm here for it. So Tommy Rees's career arc at Notre Dame has been magnificent. Quite the adventure roller coaster ride, up and down over the years or decades or however long it's been. He's got a chance to cement his name in Notre Dame lore and history if this marriage with him and Freeman goes well. So far, so good, and I'm excited for the future, and I can't wait to see what Tommy Rees can come up with on his own, left to his own devices to create the best offense to get Notre Dame into the future. I love it. I support him. I'm glad he's here. I want him and Freeman to run for president in the next election cycle.